fireside in our northern home or in the South where I was born, I learned a history not then written in books, but one passed from generation to generation on the steps of moonlight porches and beside dying fires. In one room houses a history of great-grandparents and of slavery and of the days following slavery, of those who have lived, still not free, yet who would not let their spirits be enslaved. From my father, the storyteller, I learned to respect the past, to respect my own heritage, and to respect myself. My name is Mildred Taylor, and I'm author of children's novels, which are based off my own family history. I was born September 13th, 1943 in Jackson, Mississippi. Yet that I was born in the South, I did not grow up there. My father, Wilbert, and my mother, Delitha, wanted my older sister, Wilma, and I to grow up somewhere less racist. My father had endured assaults based on his race, and being the family man he is, he did not want that for our family. So, when I was 4 months old, we moved to Toledo, Ohio with some friends because we did not have enough money to move into our own home yet. So soon my father got a job and we moved into a duplex. Once a year, my family and I go and visit our family in the South. One of my family traditions would be tell stories. My father was the best at telling stories. He would tell the best stories. He would tell stories about the past and many great stories I can still remember to this day. When I was 10 years old, we moved to an integrated neighborhood. I was the only black girl in my class. It really made an impact on me because the way they taught black people was different from the way my father had told me. They did not include the injustices my people have suffered, like my father had told me. My mother instilled in my mind that I could be anything I wanted to be, whatever race I was, and not to let that hold me back from what I wanted to be. Some years later, I enrolled as a freshman at Scott High School. In 1957. Even though I was very aware of racism, I thought it was getting better because of the civil rights movement was happening, but it was just still the same. A black girl at my school was crowned prom queen at my school, and it caused an uproar. I was the only African American student to be in the college preparatory class. I also was the class officer, editor of the school news, and I was the only black student to be elected for Junior Honor Society. During these years, something sparked inside of me, and I knew that I was going to be a writer. My models for literacy quality were classics written by white male authors. However, I did not take their style of writing. After graduating from high school, I enrolled in the University of Toledo, where I majored English and I minored history. When I turned 19 years old, I wrote my first novel, Dark People, Dark World. Although I wrote my novel and people were interested, the editors had revisions that I refused, and it never got published. Then, after I graduated from college, I became an English teacher on a Navajo reservation in Arizona. 2 years later, I traveled to Africa and taught in Yergulum, Ethiopia. I felt accepted there, unlike the American South. I escaped the racism of the United States. Although I was tempted to stay in Africa, I returned to America 2 years later. A few years later, I went back to college to get a degree in journalism, and I got it in 1968. In 1971, I moved to Los Angeles, where I met Errol Z. Dolly, my husband, and I refocused on my writing and editing. Sadly, 3 years later, we got a divorce. In 1973, I entered a book contest, my first book, Song of the Trees, and I won first place. Song of the Trees, and I got first place. I based the characters off my family and the problems I had. I later got listed on a New York Times bestseller. My second book and my most famous book, you can also see the poster back on there on the wall. This is a sequel to my book because I was planning on making a sequel, but I got very attached to the characters because I based them off my own family. Play the movie trailer.
We lived in Mississippi in 1933 on our own land, fought like long before we children were born. It was once part of the Granger plantation, and Mr. Granger, he kept trying to buy it back from us. But that land meant too much to us Logans ever to sell. I was 11 and I did a lot of growing up that year. My brother Stacy was the oldest, and after me was Christopher John. And youngest of all was Clayton Chester, called Little Man by almost everyone. Big Mom, our grandma, looked after us because Mama was a teacher at the Negro school we all went to, and Papa was away from home most of the time, working for the railroad so we could pay off the mortgage on the land. When there was trouble, Papa brought his friend Mr. Morrison home to help us, and mostly we were happy together. But we knew what whites could do to us out of not caring or out of hating. But we stood up under it. Mama got our friends to stop buying at the Wallace store because the Wallaces caused most of the trouble. We had help from a white man, our lawyer, Mr. Jameson, and he said there were others like him who didn't go along with the Wallaces and what they did. We stood up even when Mr. Granger got Mama fired from teaching, and then the Wallaces hit us.
This movie was about a 9-year-old girl named Cassie. She is a black girl in the South during the Jim Crow laws. She had a big family and they all count on each other. Her family struggled to keep the land and I won a Newbery Award for it. I wrote this novel because I could relate to it. A few years later, I wrote another novel, Let the Circle Be Unbroken. And it was another sequel to the Logan family. It is about a family and their family friend, TJ, being put on death row for a crime he did not commit. I also based this story on like the bond of family, of the bond I have with my family too. I have re-encountered events that were painful to write and painful to be read, but I had hoped they brought more understanding. I am now 72 years old, living in Colorado. Thank you for your time.